Quiz today, and we're going to see if you have any questions. So welcome back, 30s. We have 4 weeks until Christmas, so about 4 weeks to get the course done. So if you weren't stressed out before, there you go. You can add that to all of the mixed emotions you have. We're trying to move past related issue 1. And today we're going to have a second attempt at trying to show that on a multiple choice test you understand the terms and the key concepts of related issue 1. So we're going to be looking at this today. And I mentioned that over the weekend you could do the entire quiz if you wish. And before we get started, you could ask me some questions. So let's start there. Who has some specific questions that you'd like to talk about? And we can talk about any and all. Yes?
Number 36.
Let's go to number 36. Which is the last one on the test. So the first 35, you're like, this is super easy. And then you got to 36 and you're like, I don't like that. So I would always read the question first. Proponents of the ideas expressed in source 4 would also argue. So in order to get 36 right, we have to understand what the proponents in source 4 want. And then we have to add one of these 4 things to that same ideological perspective. So before I read source 4, I might try to distinguish between A, B, C, and D. A, that debt is intergenerational tyranny. So that would be from somebody that would want to see less government, less debt. They want to practice austerity. They want to practice fiscal responsibility. They're on the economic right. They probably vote conservative. So that's how I start beginning to chunk and relate ideas in my head as I break the question down. Again, it all comes down to vocabulary, right? Vocab and understanding the different connections, how the course content connects with each other. So that's A. B, the social fragmentation, that social fragmentation is desirable. So wow, what does that mean? Social fragmentation. That they actually want different social classes to exist, right? That they want people to identify differently socially. So who would that disagree with? Somebody that would say that it's undesirable might be someone like Marx that wants to see some kind of equalization, right? Some kind of classlessness. C, against society's admiration for social disobedience. Proponents in the source would also argue against society's admiration for social disobedience. So this is someone that believes that we shouldn't question the government, we shouldn't protest kind of stuff. And then D, against the role of the Senate in Canada's political system. Okay, so in order to get D right, you got to say, okay, what does the Senate do? It's a sober second thought. It's appointed by the Prime Minister. Now I'm going to go back with those 4 things kind of clunking around my head and see which of those 4 things matches up in theme to source 4. The liberal advocates the inevitability of progress, unrelated to basic principles. Okay, so that's just a statement about what liberals want. His reforms are therefore stopgap measures. Okay, that makes me think that this is a criticism of liberalism, right? A stopgap measure is a negative thing, because it doesn't actually solve the problem. So this is an anti-liberal, anti-reform statement based upon that. Probably key to unlocking the question. His reforms are therefore stopgap measures designed without reference to the lessons of the past. This person believes we should listen to the past. This is a conservative view. Without thought to the possibilities of the future, designed only to meet the needs of today. So this is an anti-progress, anti-liberal, pro-conservative, we should respect the lessons of the past statement. Then I have to say which one of those 4 is also connected to conservatism. And you may remember that I said that A is also on the right. The idea that debt is intergenerational tyranny. So there's a pull to that. Social fragmentation is desirable. I'm not sure conservatives go to speak on how they want people to be different. Against society's admiration for civil disobedience. Against the role of the Senate. Well, the Senate is something we've had around for generations, so they're not necessarily going to be against the role of the Senate. There are people on the right that would like to see the Senate reformed. and have it more equal with the House of Commons, but we can't necessarily assume that from what is said. From what is said, we know that source 4 is suggesting that liberals ignore the past, so therefore they're changing stuff too quickly. And there might be one that jumps out a little bit more there then. What did you guys come up with for 36? Did you see it as more of a, we don't want to see change too much, so social fragmentation is desirable? We don't want to see change too much, so we don't like the admiration for civil disobedience. We don't want to see change too much, so we should change the Senate, or we should be cautious about intergenerational tyranny. How many people went with A, the economic one? How many people went B, fragmentation? C, civil disobedience? So let's think about C for a second. What's the consequence of civil disobedience? Change, right? Against society's admiration for civil disobedience. If there is just an admiration for civil disobedience, and the civil disobedience isn't for a cause, then it's anti-law and order, and law and order are some of the fundamental principles of conservatism. So C is more of a political answer, and the quote is more of a political quote, so C is a better fit than A. That's a good one though, because most conservatives would also pick A, but looking at source 4, it's not talking about economics exclusively. So, any others that you guys want to look at? Yes?
Can you tell me the difference between fascism and authoritarianism?
Yes. So this is part of the language thing, right? So by the end of the course, your language will be much more sophisticated, and your language will be much more subject specific. So, and that's why sometimes people get multiple choice wrong at the beginning of the course that they would get right at the end, because they're still playing around with language, and that's why getting through the textbook's important. So the difference between fascism and authoritarianism. Fascism is one type of authoritarianism, but so too is communism. So fascism is a type of authoritarianism, but all authoritarianism is not fascism. So fascism's ice cream, but so is communism. Chocolate is ice cream, but so is vanilla. Chocolate and vanilla are different, right? So communism and fascism are both authoritarian. Communism is authoritarian socialism. Fascism is authoritarian capitalism. They're both authoritarian, but in one you have an economy that is directed by a private market, and in the other one you have an economy that is more centrally planned. But they're both authoritarian. So fascism is a subset of authoritarian. So is it wrong to call Adolf Hitler an authoritarian? No, it's not. But it's absolutely wrong to call him a communist. Is it wrong to call Stalin an authoritarian? No, it's not. Is it wrong to call him a fascist? Yes, it is. So fascism and communism, again, subsets of authoritarianism. And just because you're communist doesn't mean you're fascist. That would be oxymoronic. You know, you're swimming in two opposite directions. You can't be both. But communists and fascists are, by definition, both authoritarian. And they're authoritarian because they use techniques of dictators. Techniques of dictators are something that we would have covered in Social 20 had we gotten to that unit on the rise of dictators. Those of you that had 20 last year in quarter one or semester one, maybe you remember studying techniques of dictators. So what are techniques of dictators? Indoctrination, propaganda, cult of the leader, maybe secret police, maybe purges, show trials. So both Stalin and Hitler had these things, but they had them to try to create different types of society. Hitler was trying to create a society based on inequality, and Stalin was trying to create a society based on equality. So again, what's the difference between fascism and authoritarianism? Fascism is a type of authoritarianism, but authoritarianism is a broader term. It includes things like communism as well. Have you got through chapter 5 yet? Because chapter 5 is the only chapter in the textbook that deals with that. I also have another textbook that you could feel free to take for the rest of the quarter. There's going to be a chapter in here on the Soviet Union, and one on Nazi Germany, and it'll help distinguish between the two case studies. This is the old textbook from the previous curriculum, but a lot of the old curriculum was sorted into the new stuff too. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Can you go over number 5?
Number 5, Johnny Five's alive. Let's go to 5. Of the philosophers listed in source 3, the one that would most support the creation of a fascist government. So with communism, we have a central figure, and that's Karl Marx. With fascism, we don't have one central figure, we have multiple central figures, but no one dominant person where it's like, oh, that's Marx. So of the philosophers listed in source 3, the one that would be most supportive of the creation of fascist government. So then we got to go back to source 3, and they don't actually tell us the names, but they tell us their observations about human nature and what we should do. They think that mankind's violent and competitive, and through obedience to a powerful state, life can be worth living. And so one is Hobbes, spoiler alert, right? One is Hobbes. And based upon that, in a fascist state, would you assume that citizens' role is to be obedient to a powerful state? Yeah, we definitely saw that in Hitler's Germany. That the role of a citizen is to obey, to sacrifice some of your personal identity for the national identity, and do what is good for the fatherland, for the Führer. So there is a poll to 1. Not saying it's the answer, but it could be. It's an M for maybe. Number 2, human rights are natural. The government must serve to protect our liberty. That's the worst answer. When I think of Adolf Hitler's Germany, I don't think of a government protecting people's individual freedom. I think of a government that is executing people and taking away the most basic, which is the right to life. So it can't be 2. 2 is probably John Locke. So when I'm looking at source 3, I'm probably annotating next to it who I think they are to make my life a little easier. Our nurturing can create conflict. Nurturing is how we're raised, how in society we're influenced by others, right? Typically nurturing in the argument nature versus nurture is traced back to our families and our parents, but nurture can be based upon your neighbors, your community, and other things as well. Our nurturing can create conflict. Government will reflect the general will. Our nurturing can create conflict, malaise of modernity. Government will reflect the general will. That's Rousseau. So 3 is Rousseau. So if you didn't read 3 and say Rousseau, you need to go back over your notes of philosophers. 4, man lacks purpose in life. A strong government provides purpose. So that also sounds very fascist. So now I'm trying to decide between 1 and 4. And what makes 4 better than 1? Through obedience to a powerful state, life can be worth living. A strong government provides purpose. Man lacks purpose. Man is violent and competitive. So what fascism under Adolf Hitler and Mussolini was trying to do was to create purpose in the lives of the Germans and the Italians. And I think Hobbes is going one step too far in the sense that under the description under 1, there may not be room for economic freedom. And economic freedom, because it is authoritarian capitalism, there's still capitalism there, economic freedom is still in existence in Hitler's Germany. So 1 might be too controlling, so 4 is the answer. And in these 20th century fascist states, we see government trying to give the people identity and purpose, and through ultranationalism try to reunite their power and fervor. So 4 it is. Was that the one you were thinking of? Well, that's good news, because that took me 4 or 5 minutes, and I made the question. So this is how long it takes, right? To go through step by step and figure it out. Any other ones that you want to do? Yes. Number 3. Hopefully you guys are writing down the answers, because I'll be frustrated if you get some of these ones wrong that we do together. A student tasked with providing contemporary evidence. So contemporary means something in the last generation, last 20 or so years, A student tasked with providing contemporary evidence that could be used to continue the logic of the observations from source 2. So what we need to do is go back to source 2 and figure out, well, what is the logic? And then how could we continue it? So A, President Trump wishes to discredit media sources that oppose his policies. So I pause, and if I can only fit one thing in at a time, maybe I just have that, and I go back and I try to match it up. B, observation B, Trudeau supports the compensation package given Omar Khadr. C, Trump has selected advisors to assist him in the executive branch of government. D, Trudeau uses the practice of party discipline to enforce his vision on his caucus. So now we've got to go back to source 2, and it says the student tasked with providing contemporary evidence that would continue the logic. So we've got to figure out the logic then of source 2. Observations about the roles of government and citizens. A, the primary objective of all leaders should be the control of citizens. A society that allows authority to be challenged will never succeed. Wow, that's a very pro-authoritarian statement, right? That's a statement that authoritarian leaders would definitely support. Governments have an obligation to provide support to individuals experiencing immediate or ongoing crisis. Without this support, these individuals would be denied the opportunity to improve their well-being. Big government in both. A strong leader supported by an expert group of advisors will guide a country to greatness. Giving uninformed citizens the responsibilities of making decisions about critical issues would prove disastrous to the country. So none of these, A, B, or C, are glowing statements about democracy or political individualism. Even in C, even if that is a democracy, it's a democracy where we allow those most capable to lead the country, the strong advisors around the leader. Control by privileged few leads to corruption and stagnation. For society to achieve its full potential, liberty and equality must prevail. So the observation here, and D kind of stands out, is, to what extent should the government rule with the will of the people? That's the theme, right? Going back to our possibilities. And we're on number 3. Observation A. So, A said the primary objective of all leaders should be to control the citizens. Control. President Trump wishes to discredit media that opposes him. If by doing that would he get to control all the people? A society that allows authority to be challenged will never succeed. And what is happening there? The media is challenging him. So he wants to discredit the media. I'm going to put an M there, because if it was truly in line with the primary objective of all leaders should be to control the citizens, a society that allows authority to be challenged will never succeed. He shouldn't be discrediting media. He should be simply nationalizing it. Right? It's not one thing to discredit the independent news companies. Why would he even allow them to exist? If his goal was truly A, wouldn't he just nationalize them? Wouldn't he, instead of discrediting the media, wouldn't he kill journalists that are questioning him? So I'm not sure that the steps done by Trump in A are enough to achieve the objective there, but it's a maybe. Prime Minister Trudeau supports the compensation pact given Omar Khadr. Governments have an obligation to provide support to individuals experiencing immediate or ongoing crisis. Without this support, these individuals would be denied the opportunity to improve their well-being. So without the $10 million given by the Canadian government to Omar Khadr, would his well-being have been compromised? Maybe, but he wasn't homeless, he wasn't living in abject poverty without the compensation package. Had he experienced a crisis? Yes, but maybe it was more psychological than economic, and the compensation package wasn't necessarily to address the dire crisis he is in now, but the lack of support we gave to him earlier. So although you could think your way into answering B, it's probably not B. Trump has selected advisors to help him out. C, a strong leader supported by expert group of advisors. Wow, that's got to be the answer, right? So I'm going to probably circle C. I'm going to continue to look at D just in case. Trudeau wants to basically silence his caucus and tell them what he wants to be done. And D is no, we love democracy. So D's the worst answer. Huge pull to C, some pull to A, a little bit less pull to B, but C's your answer. Why is C the answer? Trump has selected advisors to assist him. And that is keeping with the logic of a strong leader supported by expert group of advisors. And hopefully Trump selects advisors that were experts, right? And not just, hey, this is a good friend of mine from university, and he's now going to be in charge of this government department. And again, A would be a good answer, except I would argue the word discredit's not enough. If you truly wanted to achieve the objective in A, which is to control citizens, you're not discrediting the media, you're outright controlling it. Because you could discredit it, and Trump did discredit it, but then the media still questioned him, and people still listened to the media. Adolf Hitler didn't discredit the media, he controlled the media. The state seized the media. And that's what Trump would have had to do if his objective was A. So C's your answer. You guys see that? But you also see how each one of these questions, there's so many steps, right? And that's the problem. So many steps. Any more? Your hand's been up a few times. 22. Waiting patiently you have been. Number 22. In response to the actions described in observation 1, the voice behind observation, that should probably say 2. Oh, sorry. In response to the actions described in 2, the voice behind 1 would. So I was reading it backwards. And I probably should have put the observations the other way so it would have made better sense. But in response to the actions in 2, the voice in 1 would do something. So I'm going to consider my 4 options, but then I got to figure out, well, what is the action in 2, and what is the voice in 1? So there's 3 steps here. Kind of visualize my 4 options so I can kind of distinguish them a little bit. Then figure out what is the action in 2, and what is the voice in 1. Support the individual's unique and valuable journey of discovery. So I'm going to pause and kind of visualize it, right? Everybody's a visual learner at least a little bit, so I'm going to pause and kind of visualize. What does that mean? Support the individual's unique and valuable journey of discovery. I'm thinking of people that are trying to find their way through the fluidity of gender. That's what A makes me think of. Right? That kind of matches up with A. B, question the need for such pointless display of civil disobedience. All right, A and B are different, right? So I shouldn't be stuck there. Demand that the individual accept the state as the only rightful teacher. So B and C are connected, but C goes further than B. Applaud the citizen's commitment to sacrifice for the needs of the state. So A is different than B, C, and D. B, C, and D are all pro-government over citizen. A is promoting the citizen over the government. So those are just some things that I think about before I look at it. So now I got to go to the actions in 2 and then the voice in 1. Man, these are good questions. I spent a lot of time making these. So anybody that took social sciences, maybe you can tell me who's being quoted indirectly in 2. I went to the woods because I wish to live deliberately in front only the essential facts of life. Who went to the woods? Anybody remember from social sciences? Who was the civil dissident in the States that said, I can't pay taxes, I can't support the president wants my tax dollars to be spent to support a war against Mexico, I don't support that, I'm not going to pay taxes, I'm going to drop out of society, I'm going to go live in a cabin in the woods. This is Henry David Thoreau. So when I talk about civil disobedience, we need to have Thoreau's name down, and you have a handout from last week on it. Not saying I expected everybody to get through all those handouts this weekend, but when we talk about citizenship, we'll talk about Henry David Thoreau. So I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately in front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what I had to teach, and not when I came to die discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear, nor did I wish to practice, and I can't pronounce that through my mask, but he didn't want to just resign, right? unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deeply and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to root all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. So this is someone that wants independence, right? This is somebody that's saying, you know, I want to be independent. I want to figure stuff out for myself. It's got to be A, doesn't it? Like, even before I continue. In response to the actions described in 2, the voice behind would. Maybe, as long as the voice supports that. But if the voice is saying that's stupid, then it's not A. Should we read it just in case? Probably should. Because now that I look at that first sentence, it's not A. The state determines all that is morally, socially, and materially valuable. Whoa, so the guy in 2 is saying, I'm dropping out of society, I'm going to go live in the woods. The guy in 1 is saying, we need government because government gives us everything important. So in response to the actions in 2, the voice in 1 would say, what the hell are you doing? Why would you go there? The state does everything we need. So it can't be A then. Might be B. Demand that the individual accept the state as the only rightful teacher. Could see that based on that first sentence. Applaud the citizen's commitment to sacrifice for the needs of the state. The citizen isn't sacrificing for the state. They're taking this journey on for themselves. So it's not A and D, now it's down to B and C. And that's where you get your 50-50. Which one's better? And you always pick the wrong one. So then we've got to really tune in and say, what's the difference here? Question the need for such a pointless display. Why are you going living in the woods? That's not important. Or demand that you need to accept the fact that the state is the only rightful teacher. So which one's a more powerful thing? Which one is more powerful? If the person in 1 is like a like indoctrinated, I love Adolf Hitler, Hitler youth kind of guy, right? But he knows you, and you say to him, you know what? I can't support Hitler. I can't support fascism. I'm going to go live in the woods. Is he going to say, "Well, I don't understand this. Why are you doing this? Why are you going off and living in the woods?" Or are they going to say, "No, you need to accept that Hitler is the answer for all your questions"? What's more likely? Because he's going to feel both. That's the problem. They're both correct. He's going to say, "I don't know why you have to do this," but he's also going to say, "You need to accept Hitler." But what's the more immediate? What's the biggest concern in him that he really wants to convince you of? The state determines all that is morally, socially, and materially valuable. Therefore, it has the right and obligation to monopolize all power and authority, controlling all aspects of society. The state functions as the protector of citizens, providing them with identities, welfare, and securing in return for loyalty and obedience. No rights or freedoms should exist apart from the service to the state. This is authoritarianism. This is collectivism politically. Individuals and groups constitute one unified, integral whole working towards common goals. I don't know why you got to go off and live on your own, or you have to accept the state as your rightful teacher. So, in 2, is it more that they're doing this to be disobedient? Is observation 2 more about disobedience? Or is observation 2 more about somebody trying to learn what's important? If it's more about, you know what, this is my disobedience, then B's your answer. If 2 is more like, I got to figure out what's real, then C's your answer. I went to the woods because I wish to live deliberately in front of only the essential facts of life. Hitler will tell you what's essential. The government in Winnipeg will tell you what's essential. To front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach. You don't have to learn from nature. Hitler will teach you. And not when I came to die discover that I had not lived. Your life is only important through Hitler. That the purpose of your life, the last question, you will only achieve purpose through Hitler. I did not wish to live what was not life, living so dear, nor did I wish to practice, to just resign, right? Unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deeply and suck out the marrow of life. I don't see disobedience here as much. He is dropping out, but it's all about, I want to figure out what's important, and this guy would say, hey, Hitler's your teacher. You don't have to go and do that. C's your answer. Took me a while, but I figured it out. I wanted to go A, but then I kept working, And I really did see a lot of B there. But then I had to go back and say, okay, let's go back to the actions in 2 and really say, is it about B or is it about C? I see it being about C. It's talking about what's important. What should I learn? That's a good one. I like that one. Any others? You guys ready to do this on your own? Yes. 6? Of the philosophers listed in 3, the one that would be least supportive of a social contract would be. So, even Hobbes believed in a social contract. So Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, 1, 2, and 3 all had social contract, whereas fascists don't really believe that it's the will of the people that give the glory to the state as much as the state is a reflection of the Uberman seizing the day, so it's 4. But you probably were stuck between 1 and 4, but Hobbes does talk about a social contract because the people had natural freedom. Hobbes understood that. And therefore, Hobbes believed that at some point the people surrendered their natural freedom to a Leviathan, so there must be a contract that exists there. We give you this, what do you give back to us? That's a contract. I give you freedom, you give me security. So Hobbes is still talking about a social contract. Any others? Yep. 12? Based on the values expressed by statement 4, which of the following government actions is appropriate? And all of these questions are linguistically organized like you'll see on a diploma. You know, based on this, blah, blah, blah. Like it's that kind of 2-step process that we need to get used to. So practice, practice, practice. So based on the values expressed in 4. So we have to go back and figure out what are the values in 4. Which of these government actions is appropriate? Well, I also want to visualize the 4 actions. Seeking autarky by leaving the global market. Well, if you don't know what autarky means, you're not likely going to understand. Autarky is a country that is independent. They don't import anything. So everything they need comes from within. So the Germans in the 1930s were starting to try to practice autarky because they knew that they were going to go to war, and during war, the global market would be disrupted, and those supply chains, those supply lines would be cut. So autarky is self-sufficiency. So that's what A is, seeking self-sufficiency by leaving the global market. B, abandoning austerity in light of increased poverty. Austerity is cutting spending, right? So we're going to stop cutting spending because we've got so much poverty. So we're going to spend lots. A and B are totally different things. C, forcing the nationalization of the means of production. That's Marx. Legislating against the monopolistic power of corporations. That could be Adam Smith, and that was used by like presidents like Theodore Roosevelt. So now we're going to go back into 4 and see what's happening. Based on the values expressed by 4, what action would be appropriate? The welfare state arose out of misguided desire to achieve greater social equality. The first sentence is a criticism of the welfare state. So we can assume, we can infer that this person wants to go back to classic capitalism, right? Classic liberalism. So it's definitely not C. As a result, a culture of dependency on the state has emerged. Only in a state that promotes individualism will such dependency, I think there's a D missing, be eliminated. So this is Adam Smith, or this is somebody that wants to return back to Adam Smith. So this is Ronald Reagan, this is Margaret Thatcher, this is Milton Friedman, this is Hayek. These are cast of characters, people that you guys need to get sooner than later. So this is someone that's a capitalist. So looking at the stuff, based on the values, which action is appropriate? Which action would lead to most capitalism? The answer is D. Because capitalism is a free market, and where you have a monopoly, you cannot have a market that is free. So D is your answer. Capitalists do not want A. Capitalists often can be globalists because they want to be able to take advantage of markets outside of their nation. So capitalists want to be able to put plants, factories, sell their products globally, so it's not going to be Abandoning austerity in light of increased poverty. Capitalists often want government to cut spending, right? Because capitalists want to see small government. Forcing the nationalization is the absolute opposite. That's Marxist, not capitalist. So it's got to be D. And again, it's capitalist is about free market. You can't have a free market if someone has a monopoly within it. Any others? Yes. 30. Although a central theme to both dystopian stories, so we only really know two stories that are dystopian, 1984 and Brave New World. So although a central theme to both 1984 and Brave New World was the government's control of information. Fair enough. Based on sources 5 and 6, we can conclude that the cartoonist is suggesting something. So, 2 cartoons they use, that's a lot. So I'm going to practice something a little different this time. I'm going to look at the cartoons before I look at the 4 answers. So in cartoon 6, I see a guy at a computer screen. There's another computer TV on. There's, printer. There's a coffee. It's a very screen-centric existence, right? That's all I'm getting from 6. 5 is Big Brother. Big Brother watching. That's a illustration straight out of 1984. So we can somewhat assume that the TV in 6 is watching him while he's doing the other stuff. So although a central theme to both dystopian stories was the government's control of information, based on sources 5 and 6, we can conclude that the cartoonist is suggesting that the larger issue in both societies wasn't the citizens' relationship with the government, but rather their relationships with each other. There's not much relationship with other people happening in 6. He's all by himself. So I'm not going to say no to A, but I'm going to say very unlikely. B, all dystopias are flawed and fragmented societies because they embrace the false hope of extreme individualism. Well, 1984 wasn't about extreme individualism. It was collectivism. That's why they had to adhere to collective norms. Pages 71 to 85, right? So it's not the great language there, though. The same mundane existence that the characters in these 2 stories faced are not common to people no longer linked to a greater purpose. Are now common to people no longer linked to a greater purpose. So we see a mundane existence in one, we see a mundane existence in the other. Yep. Are now common, so common today, to people no longer linked to a greater purpose. You could make an argument that today, people that don't see a purpose of why do I have life, why am I alive, they have a mundane existence. So that's a maybe. Orwell feared that those who would deprive us of information, while Huxley feared those who would provide us with so much information that we would embrace egoism and pass. I can hardly pronounce these without a mask over my mouth. So let's think about this. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Is that what's happening in 1984? The government's depriving us of information. Yes, that's what's maybe happening in one source. That I could see how source 5 is showing Big Brother depriving us of information. We can only get information through the state. Okay? Then could the cartoon in 6 possibly be showing us Huxley's fear that what happens when we have so much information? Well, he does have multiple screens going on. There's so much going on here. And because we have so much stuff, we're going to embrace egoism and other things, like what feels good. I think it's D. Well, now that I remember the question, I know it's D, but that's how I came back to it. I had to go in and look at the sources and say, what details within the sources could I actually use to say it is D as opposed to C? C, there could be a mundane existence there, but there's nothing in the 2 sources that links us to common to people no longer linked to a greater purpose today. So there's nothing that answers that second half of C. But there is stuff for the idea of, they're depriving us of information, or we're getting so much information that we're just living what's good for us. Maybe do one more, and then give you a chance to do some on your own before this video crashes. Because we do have one person away today. Yeah.
Number 15.
13, lucky 13. Like I said, 15, lucky 15. I always heard 15. I wasn't going to make 13 comments. Oh, 13 is a good question, but 15, okay, let's do 15. When one claims that individuals are by nature unique and unequal, efforts by the state to interfere with the lives of individuals will result in a restrictive and inefficient society. Well, we've seen that quote before. They are reflecting the principle of. So this is anti-state, pro-individual, right? When one claims that individuals are by nature unique and unequal, efforts by the state to interfere with the lives of individuals will result in a restrictive, inefficient life. So we don't want state to interfere. So we're not going to promote the common good, D. We're not going to promote obedience to the state, B. We're not going to adhere to collective norms, C. But what we are going to do is say individuals are unique and unequal, and we don't want the state to get in the way, so we're going to promote individualism. And economically, that's A, economic self-interest. All right, so we'll give you a chance to work on some on your own, and then maybe we'll let you ask some questions in a little bit.